So just a little bit about my background, so you know who's talking today. But my background is actually in computer science, and I work primarily in life science research and development. Um, I have always been interested in the use of technology to educate and share ideas, and this interest goes back to I would even say some of my childhood days in junior high, etc. When in fact I had an online BBS system in the 80s with the idea of sharing information about computing knowledge and such. And while Second Life is just a more recent manifestation of that kind of technology for communication and bringing people together and sharing ideas and information. As I said before, I've been in Second Life since 2006. For those who look at my profile, you'll see it says 2007. This is my second avatar. I've been involved in Second Life also in the real world. I was the chair for the healthcare track at a number of the Second Life community conventions that were held back around 2007, 2008, 2009. And I've developed a number of educational spaces within Second Life that are generally available to anyone that wants to visit them. Um, the first one that I built back in 2006 was an LGBT history museum and cultural center, and actually we did a tour of that museum last Friday for the nonprofit Commons group, and I think we had about 25 or so 30 people show up for that, and it was quite enjoyable. And I'm looking forward to doing this tour with you today. Today we'll be touring the Museum of Computing History that's existed since September of 2022, and it's grown and moved since then. And the last educational space that I built was in September of 2023 called Cat Island, and it's actually a space to learn about our feline friends, about education, about learning, how they interact with humans, how they have special health needs, etc. And it turns out there's a lot of overlap between people in Second Life and people that love cats, so it's been pretty popular. And we did a tour of that, I think, back in November last year that was well attended as well. So that's enough about me. Um, the Museum of Computing History, we're going to be heading over there in a bit. As I mentioned, the first version opened in September 2022. Um, we've had a presence at the Second Life Living Expo. We'll actually be back at that again this year. And we had a nice large plot with exhibits at the Second Life 20th birthday celebration as well. That was again well attended, and by the way, I see the number of people typing in the chat about the love of cats. So we have a lot in common then. Um, as you can see from the pictures up in the slide, the museum started off as a small single level building, rather small, with just three exhibits. Today, it has expanded into a little over 3x the size, almost about 3.5 times the size of the original building, and we're up to a dozen exhibits. We actually may find when we're doing the tour that we have some drop-in visitors, and that's because the Lindens have featured the Museum of Computing History in their editors' picks, meaning that randomly when folks launch the viewer to log into Second Life, a picture of the museum and a link to it will be right there on the screen, and that has brought in a quite an influx of visitors over the last week or so. Um, so why create a museum of computing history, in a virtual world like Second Life? Well, probably no surprise to anyone here, but quite coincidentally, there's a huge overlap between people interested in virtual worlds and people interested in computing and computing history. So it has been very very well trafficked since it got created. And the other reason I created one is there's a small number of real world computing museums. I happen to live in the United States on the East Coast. The closest museum to me is, hundreds of miles south of me in New Jersey. And there are others, on the West Coast and in other places throughout the United States. But and there's one in the UK, for instance. I know of one in Germany, a few other locations as well. But there just aren't a lot of computing museums in the real world, and a virtual museum is quite accessible. So that's another reason for it. The other thing is platforms like Second Life allow for interactive, multimedia, immersive experiences. I think that's why a lot of us are here. And so the museum, has a lot of interactive displays that you could touch, or videos that you can watch within world, etc. So it's the platform lends itself well to that. Another reason to have a virtual computer museum, or a computer museum in general, is that many of us are involved in building the future right now. We're actively involved in building virtual world, virtual reality technologies, or other technologies for education, or delivering applications to consumers, whatever we happen to be working on. And it helps to understand the past if we want to build the future. There's a lot to be learned from it. The other thing and this is sort of a more recent discovery for me, but computing is very personal to a lot of people. I can't tell you the number of, IMs or messages that I've received from people since creating the museum, about their emotional responses to seeing their first computer that they used it, as a kid. Or a couple of cases, people have messaged me and said, "Hey, I don't see the computer I used as a kid," and in a number of cases, I've added exhibits to try to do that. So it's triggered a lot of positive emotions in people, and I've got a lot of interesting feedback about, hey, I saw the first thing. Or I actually, once was approached by somebody that said, "Wow, you featured me in your influential people exhibit." I had no idea, but when I created it, that individual was in Second Life, but in fact they were. So it's kind of interesting, the personal connections as well. So we're going to look at a number of exhibits today. Obviously, in a the 40 minutes or 45 minutes we're going to have to do the tour, we're not going to be able to look at every exhibit in detail, but I am hoping to walk through. But as you can see, I've attempted in curating the content of the museum to have it as broad, starting off with, quite honestly, the first computing device we know of, the abacus. And so literally the museum starts off with an abacus. And it progresses all the way through to very modern topics such as artificial intelligence and quantum computing, two very active topics in the computing world these days. So I tried to have a mix. One of the largest exhibits is the personal computers exhibit. Again, people just seem to connect with that one, and so I'm always, as I can get models or get builds of different computers, I am trying to add them to that exhibit. So as you can see, there's about a dozen exhibits here now. We had 9 exhibits at the end of 2023, and just around the 1st of January added 3 more exhibits: the ones on virtual worlds, quantum computing, and programming languages. Those 3 were just added 2 weeks ago. So again, the museum's always growing. Thankfully, it sits on a region where I own almost all of the region, so I have the land and the land impact to be able to put the objects in on the servers. So we'll be heading over there shortly. So with that said, I think the last thing you want to do is listen to me talking here and looking at slides. You want to go see the museum. So we're going to go and head over to do that. I'm going to drop an SL URL into the chat, which if you click on that, it will take you directly to the museum. And I believe, Val, will you be standing back here to help in case anyone needs
Yes, I'll stay behind for.
assistance with that?
Absolutely. I'll stay behind for a few minutes. If there's anyone that needs help, I'll make sure we all get there. So you can
Excellent.
stand
So
up.
please take a look at the chat. I just posted. You'll see the region is called Blackslough, and that's where we'll be heading. It's on the mainland, right near the Sea of Fables, within Second Life. So
Okay, we'll see you there.
see you there, everyone. And as Paz pointed out, turning off advanced lighting does speed up. All right, Val, do we have everyone here or?
Yes, I believe everyone made it over.
Excellent, excellent. Well, glad everyone made the trip. Okay. The other fun thing about Second Life is sometimes teleports are not exactly successful. So, but it looks like we got everybody here. So, all right. Well, we're sitting in the lobby of the museum at this point. As you can see, the museum, if you're panning your camera around a bit, is pretty expansive. It's we just added 50% space to the overall layout of the building, which has allowed me to add 3 new exhibits and also have a lot of room to add more content to the existing exhibits, which is something I try to do every 2 to 3 months. The goal is, of course, to try to get folks to keep coming back and taking a look. So we're going to be heading into the early pre-PC computing exhibit, which is through these doors here. And I wasn't kidding when I said we're going to start off with the earliest computing device known to have been created by humans, and that is the abacus, and that starts right here. Following the abacus, we have things such as the Jacquard loom, which was one of the first devices to be programmed with effectively punch cards, punch tape. So that is there. We also have a number of other devices along the wall here. We have the ENIAC, which was one of the first computers that was operated by vacuum tubes along the southern wall there. Also in this room, we have a few other machines like the Apollo guidance computer that first helped navigate to the moon. We have an IBM 360, which interestingly, a lot of people come in here and say, "Oh wow, that was the first computer I worked with at one point." And so I guess a lot of people have an affinity for the IBM 360. I did not get the privilege of working with that machine myself, but the machines that I got to work with are over in this other corner. Here would be the DEC PDP-11 and DEC VAX systems, which I used pretty extensively during my high school and college days. And I bet a lot of other people here have used them as well. It looks like Art worked with a 360. One of the 90 series, so one of the larger ones. But over here we have another, IBM 1401, PDP-11. All of the exhibits here are meant to have some level of interactivity. So for all of the computers that you see, there's typically a sign with them and it says touch for info. If you click on the sign, you will get a note card in most cases given to you with information about that computer, coming from various sources, oftentimes Wikipedia or things like that. In cases where the technology's older, unlikely to be changing a whole heck of a lot, I've used note cards. In other exhibits throughout the museum, if the technology is moving quickly, for instance, some of the AI exhibits, or the quantum computing exhibits, the actual link may be out to a website or other form of information where you can actually get more up-to-date information. Even in the case of the note cards, if new information becomes available to me, I try to keep them updated over time. So this is the early pre-C. I'm not going to go through every exhibit here, but there's meant to be a smattering of systems from the early days of mechanical computers up through vacuum tube computers, transistorized computers, and early integrated circuit computers like the DEC VAX or PDP-11. And again, I'm hoping to add more. Some of the limitations here are the availability of 3D models. My own personal 3D modeling capabilities have limitations, and so as I can find them, I will add them basically. Okay, moving along, we have an exhibit here. This exhibit was just added 2 weeks ago, and it's an exhibit about programming languages. And it starts off with some generic information about what are programming languages, compilers, interpreters, and such, and goes on to provide information about a smattering of computer languages. Obviously, the number of computer languages that exist is massive. There are hundreds or more of languages, but I really did try to get a smattering here of languages going back to the early days of computer programming with things like Fortran, COBOL, BASIC, up through more modern languages like Python, JavaScript, etc. There's also an interactive display here, the one right in front of me, this monitor and keyboard, where if you actually wanted to try your hand at writing some basic programs, you just need to have the feature within the browser called Media turned on. And if you have Media turned on, you can actually click on this. You will get a ready prompt, and you can actually type in and execute basic programs here on this display if you wanted to experience that. And again, that's the kind of thing Second Life lets us do. We can have these interactive displays. You'll find we have some other in the interactive fiction exhibit, for instance, which is about text adventure games. You could actually play one of the two of the earliest games, one called Advent Adventure and another one called Zork. You can play them within Second Life by clicking on the display. The one thing I'll point out, the displays are not shared. So if you're clicked on it and typing in a program, the rest of us won't see it. It's just for you. If I click on it, I will get my own experience. So you don't have to worry about somebody looking at the code you're writing, for instance, or playing with. So that's so Art just mentioned he forgot that APL existed. I wanted to include APL in the exhibit because it is a rather interesting language that is symbol based and a little bit different from a lot of the others out there. But I for anyone here who has written code or developed any code, I hope you see one of the languages you work with here and that it brings back some memories, either positive or negative. Hopefully positive. I don't recall if I did RPG. I know somebody just mentioned that. I actually remember thinking about RPG. I can't remember if I ended up having it here. But if it isn't, it's certainly something that can be added. But this is the programming languages exhibit. So again, if you have any suggestions or things to add, and that goes for the rest of the museum, just ping me because I love to add content, and so any suggestions are appreciated. And I know some of you have IM'd me, I think, suggestions already. I'm not ignoring you. There's just a lot happening, and I will make sure that I go through the IMs after the tour and respond to you. Okay, moving in here. We have the personal computers exhibit. As you know, this room is rather big, and I have space to grow here, and that is by design, because I'm really hoping to add more personal computer exhibits as I can find them, or in some cases, build the models. Most of the computers in here go back to the 1970s, for instance. There are computers here like the Altair, which was one of the first computers commercially available. You could buy it as a kit. That is, in fact, the computer that Bill Gates and crew created one of the first versions of Microsoft Basic for. We have other computers in here like the Apple I, the Apple II, a number of the Commodore machines, the BBC Micro, which folks from the UK will probably recognize. Art mentioned he still has a TI 99 4A. I'll mention that I actually personally have a number of the machines that are here in real life as well, preserved and operational. Unfortunately, in a storage unit at the moment, but hopefully someday I'll be able to put on display like we have here. But you can see the Radio Shack TRS-80s here, which was actually my first personal computer. Oh, it looks like Notecard mentioned his first computer was a Model 3. Mine was a Model 1 from Radio Shack, in fact. I have several of these in real life as well currently. Apple II is over in front of me, another one that a lot of folks used, in their earlier days, if they're of the same vintage that I am. It was one of the first personal computers available in the late 1970s. And we have a few others around here. The Apple One is along the wall toward where we came in for anyone interested. The Apple One was largely a computer. There weren't many of them. There's very few existing in the world today. In fact, they command huge prices. Buying an Apple or a real original Apple One today can cost upwards of 40 or 50 grand at auctions. They're quite popular. In fact, I 2019 I went to a vintage computer meet at the Computer History Museum over on the West Coast in Silicon Valley, and they had a gathering of Apple One owners, and I believe they had about 12 of them on display at the time, all under glass because, as you can imagine, with prices of about 40 to 50,000 each, they are most certainly valuable these days. But do take a look around again if you have any recommendations for personal computers to be added. Please let me know. I'm always trying to find more to add to this because I know it really connects with people. Note card, I do hope to have a TRS-80 Model 3. I have not been able to find a good 3D model of one just yet. But I personally had Model 1, Model 3, Model 4 machines and currently have them all as well. The Apple One, for those interested, is over here. This is the computer that, for many reasons started Apple Computer, which, as many of you probably know, on Friday, pre-orders will start for Apple's newest device, which is going to be the Apple Vision Pro headset that I can assure you I will be in line to be pre-ordering first thing on Friday. And no card. Unfortunately, it's U.S. only. But I do believe that they've stated they intend to launch in other countries as soon as possible. All right, moving along. In here we have the interactive fiction exhibit. Not everyone calls this interactive fiction. It's sort of a generic name for the genre, but interactive fiction really refers to effectively computer games that were largely in text or in light graphics. And again, their idea is to sort of tell an interactive story that you can progress through. Make decisions. In most interactive fiction games, the decisions you make and the actions you take influence how the game will progress and function. There's a smattering of displays here about influential people, about the different games over the years. Infocom, which is along the back wall, was a rather prolific company in this space. They made a lot of games such as Zork, etc. There are two displays in here, just like the ones that we had running BASIC. There's one here next to me where you can actually try out and play the game Zork 1. Zork was an adventure game created at MIT that then Infocom commercialized. On the opposite wall is Advent, which is believed to be the first adventure game of its type. Advent was created many years ago, running on mainframes written in the Fortran programming language. And today you can actually run Advent on a lot of different machines, including iPhones, Android phones, etc. It varies, very popular. And if you do want a chance to try it out, it is right there, and you can do so interactively. In the middle is a big brass lamp and a sign about a movie called Get Lamp. Get Lamp was a movie about these interactive fiction and adventure games that are largely, again, written in text. We have an auditorium and museum. The Get Lamp movie we had showing in there for a period of time. Right now, there's actually a different movie in there about Tetris, the game of Tetris, and the reason for that is I don't know if everyone knows this, but recently a 13-year-old in the United States, back on December 21st, was the first to effectively get to the end of Tetris, to get to the point that caused the game to crash. And there's a video about that also in the lobby outside of the auditorium. But it's pretty, for anyone interested in Tetris, which is a very popular game. That is a rather momentous occasion. And it was a 13-year-old kid, yes, using, as Sword just mentioned, using a technique called rolling, which is rather interesting. The other thing about the 13-year-old that did this that's rather an important part of the story is his dad had just passed away, I think about 2 weeks before he did this. And so it's a rather interesting story. And if you go into the lobby outside of the auditorium, we'll actually end the tour around there. There's a video that you can watch on the wall about his achievement and such. So, okay, moving in here, we have a bit of an old school data center exhibit. And if you notice, you have to take a step up. Raised floors for those who've ever had the opportunity to work in more of an old school data center, where rather important features of the data center, most of the cabling was run under the floor. Each of the white tiles could be popped up using a little suction cup device in most cases. I worked in rooms like this when I worked for IBM back in the late 1980s while I was in school, in fact. And so there's a number of computers in here. Many of the computers here are what we would tend to call things like big iron, because they're very, very large computers. Some of these are from the 1980s and 1990s. The IBM 4300 series along the back would be from the 1980s and early 1990s. The IBM 3090, which is the big box in front of me, was from around that time frame. Somebody said they got a Cray 1 gifted but could not transfer. No, they're pretty heavy machines. But there is a Cray 1 here in the middle, right in front of me. Another unique computer is the Connection machine, which was a computer developed by a company called Thinking Machines in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I had the opportunity to work with one for a bit. It was one of the first massively parallel computers, using lots of small CPUs to work on very large problems. Today we do these kinds of things using GPUs, graphics cards, which are effectively large parallel computers for solving similar kinds of problems. We also have a fictional computer in here for anyone interested in computers who may have been around in the 1980s. You may remember the movie War Games. And within War Games, there was a fictional computer called the Whopper. Well, for fun, we have a Whopper here within the museum. If you click on it, it'll make some noise like the Whopper did. So I noticed someone just did that. And again, it's not a computer that ever existed, but it's something a lot of people see and they identify with it because they saw the movie. And so I hope for those who have a connection to it that you find it. Yes, it does need a signed note card. In fact, I think I created one, and when I rebuilt the museum to be in the bigger space, I didn't put it out. So I'm making a note, and I will fix that. So that will be fixed today. There's also, as you may note, as we're walking out here, there's a big red button on the wall that says "Do not press this button." This is also a bit of an inside joke to anyone who worked in large data centers. There was often a big red button like this, and the point of that button was to basically shut down the entire computer room in case there was a fire or some other major problem. It would often be behind a little plastic door or plastic cover to prevent it from being accidentally pressed. But many computer rooms had the big red button. Currently, this one doesn't. Oh, interesting note card said he did press one by accident. I have not scripted this one to do anything yet, but I'm hoping to get some time soon to script this to do something fun, like perhaps turn off all the lights in the room and make a sound of a big shutdown or something like that, just for fun. But currently, it doesn't do anything all that interesting. But it is there, and many folks will see it and probably identify with it, having seen one. Okay, this is the first floor. We're going to head up now to the second floor of the museum. So we're going to head back to the main entrance here. So here in the main lobby, there's a couple of things I just want to point out before we head upstairs. If anyone participates in the BBB Passport program, you can get your passport stamped here. You'll get a Museum of Computing History stamp in your passport. The kiosk is right along the wall under the North Wing teleporter sign. So again, if you want to get your passport stamped, you can do that here. The other thing I'll point out for those for anyone who's been in Second Life for a while, you know that teddy bears are a thing. The Lindens and Moles hand out teddy bears. A lot of other people have their own bears they've created. So keeping in that tradition of Second Life, there is a bear here in the lobby over to the side that if you click on it, you will get a copy. They're free, and if you click on the bear, it'll, as you can hear, it just made some audio, and that also comes from the movie War Games. So anyway, welcome to get the bear if you'd like, or get your passport stamped at any time. Actually, before we head up, I'll take you into this room real quick. This is just an area set up right now like a cafe. The idea would be to get people together talking. And, a few times I find people just hanging out talking about computers here. So mission accomplished. But in this area, there are a couple of things. We have the Grace Hopper Auditorium. This is a place where folks can give presentations if they would like. There's also a video display in there currently showing a movie about Tetris. Previously, the movie in there was about Get Lamp, about interactive fiction, and the plan is to change the movie in there from time to time. So you're always welcome to come in and take a look at those. In addition, there's just a conference room here that also, is available, can be used by anyone at any time if they want to have an in-world meetings. All of this space is open to the public and accessible. Along this here, we have a little mini exhibit, and the main reason this exhibit exists is, to talk about Tetris a bit, and the fact that Willis Gibson, the 13-year-old that just recently effectively beat the game on December 21st, there's a little exhibit here about him, about the computer that Tetris was first created on in Russia, about some of the folks around Tetris. And the
All right,
video
it's time
display
for a
here will actually
flashback.
show
Remember
a
Tetris?
recent
The
news
classic
segment
video game where you try
that
to
was just
stack
on
the
within
falling
last
blocks
week or
before they
so,
reach the top of the screen.
here
You
in
see
the
it right
United
there. Well,
States that
it was
talks
created
about
back in
Willis's
1984, and for
accomplishment,
decades it was considered
about the game
unbeatable. But
Tetris,
that's
the
not the case
technique
anymore.
used,
And why? Well,
etc.
a
In addition, there are a
13-year-old
couple
Willis
of
Gibson made it
Tetris
further than
game
in the
arcade
game,
consoles here
even
where
than
you
the
can actually
developers anticipated. He quite literally
experiment
crashed the
with it
code,
and
and
play
our Valerie
Tetris
Castro is here with an
So
absolute blockbuster
that
of
was
a
just
story.
added
Valerie,
to
how
sort of
did he do it?
coincide with the current events happening. And yes, the Tetris effect is a real thing. If you play a long time, it definitely can have an effect on you. And I would say the Tetris effect also applies to Second Life. If you spend a lot of time in Second Life, you can start to see cognitive effects. Yes, exactly. As Zri just mentioned, we can say it's the SL effect these days. All right. With that said, let's go back to the lobby and head upstairs. There's a few exhibits up there as well that I'd like to walk you through. So we can head up the stairway here. There are actually 3 stairways, one in the middle and one on each side of the museum. looks like we have most folks up here. This particular room has an exhibit on computers and communications. It tries to cover a smattering of the history of computers in communications. Along the back wall here, we have a number of exhibits. Um, One of them is about MUDs, which, for anyone familiar with MUDs, they were sort of a text precursor to systems like Second Life. MUDs were effectively text-based virtual worlds that you could build, collaborate with others on, explore, influence in many ways, and they had communities a lot like Second Life, and were used for quite a variety of um, topics, interests, communities, etc. Many of them still exist to this day, in fact. Um, Also, here's a Plato terminal Minitel, which for those from France was a early precursor to the internet. That was a system in France. Along the back here, we also have a bunch of online services. Uh, Many folks have used services like AOL or CompuServe. Again, many of them were sort of precursors in a way to things that we do in on the web now, or in places like Second Life. Um, Prodigy as well. Yes, Prodigy was created by IBM and Sears. It was a mixture. In fact, I while in college, I worked for IBM in the late 1980s, and I worked in Boston, Massachusetts, and the local node for Prodigy was actually in the data center that I worked in. So it was kind of neat to see all the modems and the setup there. Um, but yes, as Ree said, MUDs are very much like virtual worlds in text form, um, that were built collaboratively, just like Second Life in many ways. And there's quite a few. Some of the oldest ones, like Lambda Mu, and some of them still exist to this day. Using a text terminal emulator on a computer, you can access them and explore the world in text at this point. Also, along here in this exhibit, we have effectively what was the first internet router. Right in front of me is the BBN IMP, which was effectively the first packet switching router, created by a company called BBN, and it was installed, I believe, at Stanford and a couple of other locations in California, and then eventually linked to the East Coast with MIT, Harvard, a number of other places, and really was sort of the first internet router. It's about the size of a refrigerator, probably weighed just as much. In fact, I've had the pleasure of seeing one of these in person when I was at a meeting in BBN back in the 90s. They took me into a computer room where they had one of these in the corner. It obviously wasn't functional at the time, but they had maintained it. And there's also one of these in the Computer History Museum in California, in Silicon Valley. You can actually click and open. There are some textures in there to show you what it looked like. It just was a lot of hardware and wires. Um, but again, keeping to the interactivity, a lot of the things here will open or react to you. For instance, if you touch the old school analog modem over here in the BBS exhibit, it will make the modem sound, which anyone that used dial-up will be quite familiar with. I think someone just clicked it, so we're about to hear it. So that's one of the things. Bulletin boards were a thing, in the 1980s and 1990s. They were very much a precursor to the modern internet. They were done through dial-ups, mostly run by hobbyists from their own homes. You can hear the modem dialing up. I actually ran a bulletin board when I was 13 years old on my TRS-80 Model 1. It was, by today's standards, rather pathetic, considering that the Model 1 had 48K of RAM and a floppy disk could store a whopping 123K. But in its day, it was a lot of fun. And software wasn't available. It's not like I could go out and buy BBS software when I was 13, so I literally had to write my own BBS program in BASIC. Also along here, some other internet things. One of the very early Cisco routers. Cisco has a lot of influence on the early internet. Cisco routers were in fact a very important part of moving packets, and even to this day, Cisco plays a very important role in a lot of organizations for their routing, for their switching, etc. Another device that I have here in front of me is the Livingston Portmaster. A lot of people don't really know about the Portmaster, but if you dialed into an internet service provider in the 1990s, there's probably a really good chance that you were dialing into a Livingston Portmaster. So again, if you dialed in to a small ISP, a lot of them were run by small companies, etc. You were probably connecting through the internet in one of these Livingston Portmaster boxes. So I wanted to make sure we had one of those here. So anyway, there's always been an overlap between computers and communications, and I tried to cover some of that here, leading up to more modern day internet and cloud computing. Okay, continuing on, we're going to head in here. This is the video games exhibit. And I've tried to have a cross-section of video games in here. There's a lot of arcade consoles. The vast majority of them are playable. So if you click on one and you have media turned on within your viewer, you can in fact play the games through these consoles. Somebody says monitors are missing. You may not have media turned on if you're not seeing the displays. You do need to have media turned on, which is effectively rendering HTML on a prim within Second Life. That's how those work. And so looking through, you'll see there's quite a smattering here of games. Pong, which was one of the first electronic video games, is here along this wall in front of me. I do not have what's often considered one of the first video games, which is Space War, running on the PDP-1. I am actively trying to find a model of the PDP-1, which I can include here and hopefully have an exhibit on Space War. We also have quite a few about handheld game consoles along here on this wall. Again, this is something that a lot of people identify with. They're like, oh, there's my first, I had a Game Boy, or I had this, or I had that. And note card, yes, I played Pong on a TV when I was a kid as well, many years ago. And yes, if you left it on, it would burn the image into the tube. So that was definitely a possibility. And over here, we have one of the first available game consoles as well that used programmable cartridges, the Atari 2600, which again, for a lot of people around the world, if they're of a certain vintage, was one of their first game consoles that could take cartridges. And yes, the idea is to make period furniture and a big honkin' console TV, so that you get the full experience. The only thing I'm missing is the wood paneling on the walls to get the full 1980s effect. But that was the goal, was to have it feel like a bit like that. So okay, so this is the video game stuff again. If anyone and by the way, note card, yeah, I'm sure I can find. If not, the texture is probably quite easy to get a hold of, so it's probably quite easy to add that. All right, continuing along, we'll go into the next exhibit, which is one that I think will probably be of interest to everyone here. This is the Virtual Worlds exhibit. And this one is new. This was just added about 2 weeks ago. And this particular exhibit, I tried to have a smattering of virtual worlds from, some of the early ones in the 1990s. Active Worlds was one of the first ones. through obviously more modern ones such as Roblox, etc. And of course, I made sure that Second Life was presented here as well. In addition, there's a video here at the end about an often little known virtual world system that existed in the 1980s called Habitat. Um, and you can watch a video about it. It was created actually by George Lucas and his organization called Lucasfilm. And it's rather interesting. It ran on early PCs, Commodore 64s, and such, and used the network that ultimately became AOL for its transport. And Art, you mentioned Lively. I do believe there is an exhibit here on Lively. I'm trying to remember, but I think there's one. Yes, there is one here. It unfortunately didn't last that long, but it is represented because it was kind of interesting. And again, if anyone has suggestions, certainly love to hear them. I always like to add content when I can. But the goal here was just give a smattering of virtual worlds throughout the times. And again, obviously, this one's going to be a moving target, so I'm hoping to add additional things to this. And I see folks talking about Red Light Center, yes, which is an adult virtual world. I don't have Open Simulator here, but I probably should. So that's a good suggestion. So I definitely will note that down. So I agree. I will add Open Simulator. It's a very important, Open Simulator as a is, although I thought of it more as a technology than a virtual world itself, but I do think it should be represented here, as a technology. I agree. So thank you for that suggestion to the folks who have suggested it. And Kitely certainly is another one. Oh, good point, No Card. I did not include Sansar here. I think for some reason in my mind, Sansar was a brief, much like Lively. But yes, I definitely did participate in Sansar when it was online, and I know it's living, still in other uses, but it's a good one. I'll add it. Again, this exhibit is literally 2 weeks old at this point. It just launched around and High Fidelity as well. Yeah, good suggestion. I completely forgot about that, and I don't want to get on Philip's bad side. So, yes, please. What I suggest is if you have suggestions, either drop a note card on me or an IM, so that I don't lose them. And I'm trying to take notes here as well, but there's a lot going on, as you can imagine. But yes, this exhibit's 2 weeks old, and like all the exhibits here, I intend to grow it. And every exhibit here gets new content added at least every 2 to 3 months. That's some of what happens. Okay, continuing on. A more modern thing here is the artificial intelligence exhibit. This one was added last June, and since this is a fairly recent, I shouldn't say fairly recent. Obviously, people have been doing AI stuff since the 50s and 60s, but it's something that's very fast moving these days with the introduction of LLMs and generative AI. So this is an exhibit that I'm constantly adding content to. Some of these exhibits, instead of giving note cards, will excuse me, go out to websites, because obviously that's one of the best ways to keep up with things. One thing I'll just point out over here was something I added around middle of 2023. You are able to, over here where I'm standing, interact with ChatGPT from within Second Life if you'd like to. I called it Cat GPT. It's a little black cat that looks just like the little black cat laying right next to my keyboard here in real life. And you can communicate with that by typing cat and some text, and it will respond to you in chat, with the information. This is implemented using the Chat GPT APIs. I wrote some LSO code to do that. So that's there. You're welcome to play with that at any time. It is deliberately set up to give you relatively short answers. Part of that is so I don't end up with a huge API bill, because I do pay the bill for the API out of my own funds. And so it should respond. Occasionally the API is down, but somebody just asked it which is the best virtual world, and it just responded. And so you can see it actually, it said number 1, Second Life. So that's pretty cool. Yes, Art, this goes to my API account, so it is set to do smaller responses, so I don't end up with a crazy bill each month. All right, let's continue on. I know we just have a few minutes left. I just want to show you the last 3 exhibits. So we're going to head over to the other side of the museum now. So if you can follow me, I just want to show you the last 3 exhibits. And even though we'll be out of time shortly, I can hang out to answer any questions or whatever, for a longer period if people would like. So this particular exhibit is about influential people in computing. And I've tried to keep this pretty broad. And not just to the typical ones that everyone thinks of, like the Bill Gates, the Steve Jobs of the world, but I tried to have an international presence here from throughout the world, as well as some unknown folks, such as Margaret Hamilton or Dorothy Vaughan, who were quite influential during the early days of computing. And yes, Philip Rosedale is here. I figure if he ever visits, I didn't want to get on his bad side, so I made sure he was represented. And he deserves to be here, in my opinion. So, and again, if anyone has any suggestions, of folks that should be added here, on one tour I gave previously, I got a couple of suggestions and added a couple more people to this. So, again, please let me know. So, sounds like Pi has a crush with Philip. I think a lot of folks in Second Life have a crush with Philip. Maybe not romantic, but certainly a crush of sorts. So, but this exhibit, again, you can click on any of these to get information about the people. In most cases, these are going to give you note cards, so you can learn about the different folks. Art Satoshi Nakamoto is actually a good idea, even though we don't really know who that is per se. Their creation of crypto, whether you think it's bad or good, is certainly an influence on computing and blockchain. So it definitely probably should be included at some level. Influence is, depending how you look at it, it could be positive or negative, but it is influence nonetheless. The other folks here, are Claude Shannon, over where my beam's going currently. Claude is known as one of the architects of modern information theory, upon which a lot of communication and encoding technologies are built. So definitely a smattering here of folks. Okay, next exhibit is about computer security, hacking, and hackers. There are many influential computer hackers, and I use the term here, by the way, broadly. I do not mean the term as in just malicious hackers. I use the term here also in the folks that just like to explore technologies and make technologies do things they weren't always meant to do. A lot of folks in um, Second Life are in fact following the hacker spirit. And so there's a thing here about different groups, different publications, and as well a smattering of hackers. Both of the uh, white hat or black hat varieties. There's different hats here along the floor. White hat hackers are ones that usually use their skills for good. Black hats are known to be more exploitive. Um, but again, this is an exhibit. This one's been here for a little bit. This exhibit's about 6 months old. And we're just going to head in now to the last exhibit, quantum computing. This is a rather popular topic these days. Many believe that as we are able to advance quantum computing technology, we're going to be able to solve problems far beyond what we can do today with more linear types of computing. And so this exhibit talks about both the technologies and the concepts behind quantum computing, some companies that are actively involved in it, and a little exhibit here at the end where I'm just walking, which is a typical kind of what quantum computers look like. Lots of tubing, um, kept at crazy low temperatures because that's typically required for the technology to operate. And so, again, this exhibit is a moving target at this point, and I'll do my best to try to keep this up to date.
Question for you, Brian.
Certainly.
Is this all a solo project? Have you done all of this yourself? Because this is amazing.
So I actually want to speak to that a little bit. So it is not entirely a solo project as something of this size. I am largely assisted by two folks. One of whom is my real life spouse, who does effectively quality assurance. Basically loves to point out where I make mistakes, is what I should say. But no, really does do a very active job of testing all of the exhibits coming through from time to time. As new exhibits are added, they're completely reviewed and given a quality assurance to try to keep the quality level high, which is, by the way, what my real life spouse does in as a profession is computer systems quality stuff. So we definitely leverage that here. And so he's involved in that. In addition, a friend of mine who I met in Second Life many years ago, who I've actually never met in real life, but Timothy McGregor is his name. He helps with the builds. So some of the objects you'll see are owned by him, like the benches in here, for instance, were made by him. Other objects he makes to support the museum as well. In addition, the big plaza that we have out front is actually in another region. This build is right on the edge of the Black Sail region. The big sort of garden plaza and seating area and everything that's out front is in the Pippin region, and that's actually land owned by Timothy and managed by him that he does to sort of support the museum as well. I will say the vast majority of the exhibits have been created by me, and I pretty much decide what content ends up here and build most of that. But it does take a village to some degree. So computer history is a very important thing to me. And in fact, prior to the pandemic, I had planned to open a real life computer museum. It was something I have storage units full of retro computer stuff. And my goal was to open a museum. Well, then the pandemic happened. And that's when the idea came for a virtual museum. And quite frankly, as this has been growing, I don't know, at this point whether I will do a real life one or will continue to focus on this, or potentially bringing something like this to other virtual world or XR type technologies.
I mean, the nice thing about setting it up in a place like a virtual world like Second Life is that you can do things that might be very difficult or impossible to do in real life space. I mean, like add an extra wing and 3 new exhibits. I mean, Yeah.
Yeah,
This
that
is
would be
great.
a really expensive in real life, as you can imagine.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
yeah, and so the barrier to entry here is a lot lower, and I can quite frankly reach more people with this. So that's part of the goal. And yes, somebody mentioned it's on the mainland. Um, this museum and the LGBTQ museum that I have are both on mainland. My goal with that was hopefully some people would stumble upon it while just looking around. And so that was the goal. The Cat Island, the one that's about felines, is actually on a private region that I own, but it is open to the public. Mostly, I just wanted an excuse to play with a private region, so I grabbed a homestead and built the Cat Island.
Well, thank you
And so
much.
this is the end of the.
It's
We've looked at the entire build, so this is the end of the official tour. But I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank
or
you
chat.
so much. It was just amazing, Brian.